Another month, another rate rise as the RBA's madness unsurprisingly continues. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion and the Gold and Silver Standard. Today, we welcome back Branko, who we were just talking off camera, has been having, both of us were having a little bit of a rant about this situation with inflation. It's not the first time we've talked about it. Probably won't be the last time we'll talk about it. Not so much inflation, but the RBA's response to it. So looking forward to getting into that with you today, Branko. How are you going?
Yeah, good. I mean, it's going to be an absolute Philip Lowe rant session today. I think just some of the stuff he's been saying and some of the policies they've been doing, it just makes no sense, and I think we're just frustrated.
It is frustrating. It's funny actually because the title and you put the article together today, and I was reading it, and it sort of unsurprisingly continues. It was that they're continuing, and this shouldn't be a surprise. But it did actually catch me a little bit by surprise yesterday. I really thought, because there's been so much talk about the Fed potentially not they're not calling it a pause, they're calling it sort of a skip. So skipping this one that's coming up. So I thought, probably makes sense that we would as well. I actually wasn't expecting them to go through with it, but I think you probably were. So, what was your take on what happened yesterday? Where do you see this all coming together? And particularly from the research you've been doing, where does this put us historically? So if you look at what's been happening, what specifically happened yesterday, and where we are now, how do you see that placing us as an economy?
Firstly, I got to say you got to have a bit less faith in the RBA to make good decisions. That's the first point. That's the big lesson. No, but I would say so quickly, 0.25% rise yesterday, right? Kind of the standard rise we've been seeing, but there was a bit of talk around it not potentially happening, like you were saying. So we're at 4.1% right now, which is the most we've had since April 2012. Mm-hmm. And kind of the key takeaway is, according to their own data, right, by the end of this year, they're going to have the biggest mortgage payments to household spending, if that makes sense. Like the mortgage payments are going to make the most they ever have compared to household spending. And that's according to their own data. So they're doing this with the knowledge that it's going to hurt people, which is extremely frustrating. And then furthermore, I would add that there is expected to be about 500,000 homes that are going from fixed to variable this year. So you're going to have further stress on the mortgage market because those homes are going to be going from 2% to enter the current interest rate environment, which is 6%. So all those homeowners are going to be under extraordinary stress. So historically, the cash rate is the most it's been in 10 years. And then economically, it's looking pretty bleak.
And I just want to pause you there because since the theme is ranting about Philip Lowe today, that really annoys me, that cliff. So we talk about it as a cliff where you've had people on the variable rates turning to fixed rates, and then on fixed rates and then turning to variable rates, and it really hurting them. Now, people fixed because that was what the RBA was telling us effectively to do. So what we're talking, the average sort of fixed rate's probably about 3 years. About 3 years ago, what were they saying? They were saying, we're going to keep it there. We're going to bring it to zero. We're going to keep it there for a long period of time. So people took that advice and fixed in, which has exacerbated the problem now. And that really annoys me because there's not sort of any acceptance of responsibility for what was being said back then that is now causing this situation to happen right now. It's not a coincidence that we've got hundreds of thousands of people rolling over from fixed to variable. They were told to fix.
Yeah. And again, it only makes the situation worse. Like we're already at quite a high level in terms of household debt, and it's only about to increase even more. So it is a worrying kind of sign.
So can you give us a bit more detail of what Lowe was actually talking about in that speech? Because you highlighted a few things in the news today, but what were the areas you were particularly paying attention to?
So there are a few things. First one is he basically hinted that it's going to continue, which we've come to expect. But again, you would hope, given the conditions, he would ease off. But he just keeps saying, we're going to beat inflation. We're going to beat inflation, the usual situation there. And he also said that, which I want to get into a bit later, which was that we're still seeing extremely high prices in the service industry and in basically energy as well, which are caused by international factors. So they're probably the two key takeaways from his speech. So overall, expect this to continue. And a lot of it is the consequence of things that might be out of the RBA's control.
Because that's my next question. Can they really control inflation? Because something that's increasingly coming into my thoughts around this is some work that's been done saying that higher rates could actually be contributing to inflation. And that's a difficult one to get your head around, because we've been told the whole time that, raising rates obviously is designed to stop spending and reduce inflation. But this idea that as people end up having to pay more on their mortgages, for example, it then means they're feeling that they're not earning enough from work, so they're hitting their bosses up for more money. The fact that you are earning higher yields on government debt, and there's so much government debt, means there's more money and liquidity flowing back into the system from those interest payments from government. So there's some arguments starting to come out saying that potentially inflation, trying to control inflation via rates is not really the best way to do it at all. And potentially you can't even control it by rates. And one step further, maybe it even contributes to higher inflation as the expectations all get out of whack and as it continues on and on. So what's your thoughts around some of that?
I think that's a great point that you made. I would also add that the two biggest contributors are the housing crisis and the energy crisis overseas, both of which rates do not control, right? So whatever the RBA does, it's not going to change energy prices, oil prices, the Russian situation. It's not going to control that. Mm-hmm. And then also whatever they do, it's not going to control the housing crisis that we have where, if you want to go view a property, you're competing with 100 other people, and obviously they can charge whatever they want when there's that level of demand, right? So the RBA's rates cannot control that. So that's why it's most frustrating, because they're attacking a problem in a way that doesn't actually solve it. It just exacerbates it.
Because those things are not even related to,
of course,
the interest. I mean,
and Lowe admits that. Philip Lowe actually admitted that.
Right.
He said, "Wait a minute, we have this these extremely low vacancy rates, and that's what's driving some of the prices in property. In what world is rising interest rates supposed to solve that issue? It doesn't." And that's by his own words.
I can't understand that either, because if that is the primary driver, and if you've got, let's face it, Philip Lowe in this example, he's the top, he's the peak authority on this issue, with all those people supporting him at the RBA. So if he's saying that really the big driver of this is housing affordability, particularly for people renting, it doesn't make any sense to be attacking it by effectively making housing even more expensive. I don't see how that works. What did he actually say? What is his plan around the rental crisis? How does he?
I'm glad you asked. This is one of the most aggravating things I've ever heard him say. He said, and I quote, "The solution is going to be to economize your housing situation." So what Philip Lowe wants you to do as a homeowner is he wants you to just rent out any spare bedroom you have in your house, or if you don't have a spare bedroom, use your laundry, use your study, potentially a balcony. I know someone that's done that as well.
Yeah, I actually know a very smart guy I've spoken to once who came up here, up to Brisbane from Melbourne for a short period of time, and he couldn't get a rental place, so he ended up renting on someone's balcony. Would you believe it? Yeah.
That's this guy, yeah. So Philip Lowe wants you to completely just economize the property that you have, and in the event you have no space at all, well, tough luck. You got to figure something out. That's literally his solution, is that he expects rising property prices to just make people just continue to stay at home if they can, or rent out any spare room they have. That is what Philip Lowe expects you to do, and him raising rates only makes that worse. So it's extremely frustrating.
I get frustrated with that as well, because there's no real evidence to support that. So if you've got, like I said, he's the top, he's the pointy end of our structure that should be the authority, that should know everything that's going on. And to make a statement like, well, maybe you've just got to economize more at home, or stay at home longer if, people who wanted to move out, for young people, that's just, it's often not practical. And I don't know that necessarily flows through the way that he thinks it does. It feels to me like there could be a lot of unintended consequences, because that's not the area that I would be cutting necessarily. I might be cutting my spending in another area, not on housing. If I feel that I really need to move out of home for work or study or whatever reason, I go, well, that's an essential. You have no choice on that. I'm probably going to cut my discretionary spending, which is more likely to impact other people's jobs. So, but jobs aren't really the area that he's saying the inflation's coming from.
Correct.
If anything, from the data that we were talking about with Alex on Monday, we've been lagging in the wages keeping up. So if we're behind in wages keeping up, that's not the issue. The issue is just the supply of housing.
Yep, it makes no sense, and his policies continually hurt those that need help the most, and it's just really difficult to watch this kind of just disaster that is the RBA at the moment, just making these decisions, and it seems uncanny. They're going to keep increasing it, and the problem just won't get solved, and inflation is going to stay at this elevated rate because of these factors outside of their control.
Yep,
and it's just going to give them more of an excuse to keep raising it. So
I would argue that we should have peaked in inflation and it should be pulling back down for this part of the cycle at least. And that's why I was expecting the skip, potentially pause and all of these things. But if you're using the wrong metrics, then there's nothing stopping them from raising again. Is that what you see? Do you see that they're probably aren't done?
I just think that, like, even though inflation's come down from its peak, right, but it's still going to be at an elevated rate for all these external factors. So they're going to use that as a means to say we're going to keep raising it, even though, again, what they're doing doesn't solve the issue. So I just think it's going to keep going up because they, for whatever reason, want to keep doing this.
So the solution just seems to be send Branko out to the balcony. That seems to be... Yeah. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that little Philip Lay rant session. So thank you for that, Branko.
Thanks for having me on. It was a good one today.
And you're away for the next few weeks, so off out and about, gallivanting the globe. So I hope you enjoy that and have fun.
Thanks. It'll be fun. Hopefully, no balconies overseas. Should be good. But
well, you might get some good insight in what's actually happening because you're off to Europe, aren't you?
Yeah. So I'm sure there'll be probably much less of a housing crisis there. So hopefully get a good place to stay. But
we might get some good stories when you return. So we'll definitely get you back when you return in a few weeks. So thank you for all that work today and what you've been doing. And we look forward to your triumphant return. Remember, everyone, you can reach out with any questions or comments on the social platforms and we'll get back to you. That's us for today. We'll be back tomorrow with Sam to discuss all things metals and markets as we do. So until then, we'll talk to you later.